Hi, welcome to Ward 13. We were already having a very spirited discussion before the camera. Jim O'Connell's here defending the Affordable Care Act.
I am?
Weren't you?
In a sentence, yeah. Okay.
Well, let's get our guest on.
Whatever you want to start.
Well, you can. We'll call my other guest.
And who's your other guest?
Victoria Antonova, who is the Moscow correspondent for Matt Connerton Unleashed, although she lives in Pebble Beach, California.
She's the Moscow correspondent.
Moskva, right?
Moskva.
None of this British intonations.
Yeah.
You're not. You've lost a lot of your Irishness, although none of your orneriness, I say.
No, I'm always ornery. Ornery's good.
Affordable Care Act. When I was writing about it for Yahoo, I called it the No Health Insurer Left Behind Act.
Well, that is true. That is, it's only in America that we would have a solution that made sure that private enterprise got its greedy fingers in the pie. But just to be clear, I'm not anti-private enterprise. I'm saying that a solution that makes sure that they are, kept part of it is where I have a problem.
Who's kept a part of it?
Our solution was to take private insurance companies and make them wealthier. That was
our solution, or that was the lobbyists.
Yes, the
lobbying a wonderful
if you want to talk
Congress.
I'd like to talk about the lobbying that went on with regard to the state budget that we have.
No, we're not talking about the state or the city. We're talking about how people have become robots, which you said you would enthusiastically like to talk about because
I never said
you're Dean Kamen's latest model.
I never said any of that. He's making it all up, folks.
Norm Moody's spirit's here. I can read your mind. I'll pull it out of you.
Are we finished? How much time?
Is there a microphone next to the phone in there, John?
I don't know. Where is she?
A microphone next to the phone.
Why does it sound like a very hot?
Incredibly loud.
My mic's here. Are you there?
A little mini one.
The little mini one's on top of the Polycon.
I don't hear anybody. We have the microphone over here. The joys of live TV. Jim, how's your week been going so far? Well, I try to get this call through.
All right, so we can, in the interim, then we can talk about, what would you like to talk about? We're going to talk about
You said that Dean Kamen has unleashed an army of robots on the west side.
Why do you say things that I never said any of that?
Because we're making a show, Jim. We're having some fun.
You're making stuff up.
Jim,
I thinking you were a serious journalist. All right, we're going to start making stuff up.
Jim, journalism is this. You write stuff down. Having fun on a television show is another thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not one, so I wouldn't
You said that today.
Tell
us about Dean Kamen.
So
and his
I was
robots.
saying that tonight at City Hall, Dean Kamen's company are.
You mean the robots have seized City Hall?
So they're putting on display there a robot that's going to be used by FedEx to deliver packages, and they have a bunch of major retailers who've agreed to use it as a pilot project, including Walmart and Lowe's.
What kind of robot?
It's a package delivery and pickup robot. It's 200 pounds. It's going to be on the streets of Plano, Texas, which is where FedEx is. And in Memphis, Tennessee, and in the city of Manchester.
Wow! And how many people is it going to put out of work?
I don't know, but eventually a lot of people, I'm sure, that's the way the world is going to be. Just like the combine harvester got rid of the guys with the sides, and when we got rid of the horses, the guys needing to pick up the manure all lost their jobs too.
There weren't 8 billion people then.
I have no problem with this. I don't want to.
There weren't 8 billion people. What are they going to do? Sit on their cans and take drugs?
No, but you're either a Luddite and regressive, or you're not,
or you're either Manichaean, right? It's either or.
No. I mean, you could go back to a time. You could go back to a time in Manchester where 10 and 12-year-olds were working in the mills, and they worked a 6.5-day week, and 10% of people got to go to high school. In 1940 in the United States, 10% of people went to secondary school.
My parents, my mother was born into Dickensian poverty,
right.
And my father had to thread a bobbin in one of those mills before he went to West High School.
So back to let's put
so I don't need to.
But the point is,
The point is what?
Is that
the jobs for people.
Advances. There will. The life moves on, right? It's the way in which we deal with this.
Over a little.
It's the way in which we deal with this, right? There are some countries in the world who are actually openly talking about today.
You mean your China?
No, the opposite of the gentleman from China who was speaking this week. I don't know if you're referring to that.
No, you always are enthusiastic about China.
No, that's not true either.
Yeah, you are. You've talked about
guy.
China.
I've talked about the moon.
You've
Doesn't mean I believe that it's a piece of cheese and there's a man on it.
You've talked about China and its infrastructure projects.
Yes, I have.
Right here on this show.
Yes, I have. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm not holding up China as the example of the solution to the ills of the modern world or anything. That's not the case. So I'm not. Why are you? I don't.
Why am I so belligerent? Because I can't get my call through.
So let's go back to.
I like the thing about Dean Kamen's robots.
Yes.
My guest was going to speak about robotization.
Well,
not of mechanization, but of the Americans.
Yeah, well, I don't know where they were going with that, but if you're talking about sort of the economy and how it's changing and automation is changing things, of course it is. And we had people for as long as the Industrial Revolution went on, we had people who felt that the Industrial Revolution was going to be the end of the middle class, and it was going to be destroyed. And
there was no middle class, Jim, until after World War II in the United States. I don't know what it was like in Ireland.
Yeah, well, the middle class expanded. We'll agree on that, right? That
it expanded after World War II.
But for years, people have felt, right, that the growth of technology and industrialization first, and then technology, that it would displace people, and they would end up with being worse off, with worse lives, being more impoverished, etc. And that's actually not the way things have turned out.
It's not.
It's not, correct. So
no, I'm asking you that facetiously. It's not.
Absolutely, it's not. You can use any measure you want. Which measure would you like?
What measure?
So
what about debt? What about the household debt that's a record household debt? What about that, Jim?
What about it?
That people are living in a kind of a fantasy world where J.P. Morgan is now dealing with cyber currency.
Yeah. So
my father used to sell aluminum siding, blue skies.
Yeah, people still sell aluminum siding.
I don't know.
They don't have machines putting it up anymore. They have machines that cut it now, and it goes a lot faster. They've got trucks that move more efficiently and drive more efficiently, and so they need less people to do it, etc. But it still works all the time. It's not a problem. But the kind of numbers I was talking about is that I said to you that in 1940, 10% of people in the United States didn't go to secondary school, didn't finish school at the end of elementary
my
school.
grandparents went to 8th grade.
If we look at child poverty rates, or just poverty rates that don't child poverty, if we look at life expectancy rates, if we look at infant mortality rates, if we look at disease rates, if we can look at all.
Well, you're selling us blue skies.
No, it's not blue skies. They're facts, right?
What facts?
The facts are.
But they're statistics. You can look at statistics anyway, can't you, Jim?
I'll tell you what you could do.
I could tell you what investors in the early part of this millennium would use the old GNP matrices to make a play, because GDP, which used hedonics, kind of softened everything
but
up.
As you know, it's just that kind of goes to the idea that there are more statistics and damned lies, right?
Well, you can have statistics.
You can't deny the things that we can sort of touch and feel and see. So if we were to look at the conditions in which the average family lived in the city of Manchester,
you are
in
a Jesuitical in your rhetoric.
No, in 1940,
you're actually using an argument of the flat earthers for that one.
Well,
because actually, the modern era is blue sky. It's not just anything you can touch.
Well,
Jim is a very well-educated person. He's got everything stuff. He's got so many arguments in there. It's like baseball. You come in with a fastball into the chin, and then this curveball.
Yeah, so, and I can handle some curveballs, but I'm a pretty plain guy. I'm pretty plain spoken. So to me, it's, when I listen to people talking about the sky is falling Chicken Little style, and that, oh, woe is us, we want to go back to this rosy past. I challenge people to name the period that was the rosy past, because upon scrutiny, it turns out the rosy past wasn't that rosy at all.
So something like Weimar Germany and when it all happened in there, that was part of progress.
And there was progress in Weimar Germany.
Well, it's part of progress, like the hyperinflation, or what happened in Japan at a certain
Well,
time.
Dadaism comes from, the whole growth of...
When when the vast unemployment led to fascism.
Am I saying that it's a continuum, that it's solely a march towards the march towards modernity is a straight line without any regression anywhere?
Do you believe Vico, like Vico, the old Italian philosopher? As an Irishman, I'm sure you know who he is.
I don't, actually.
Having read James... Haven't you read James Joyce?
Yes, I have.
You know that history is an upward spiral.
Gyring. But it's upward. I mean, I remember, if
is
you read,
it?
Of course.
Why
is
it?
Is. Of course it is.
Why see it as that way? That's like a bias.
Well, you could be like you're familiar with Malthus, right? The Malthusian concept of scarce resources. We know resources are scarce, but Malthus argued at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. He argues, and his arguments are still referred to today. But he argued at the time, given the use of coal and steel, etc., and he estimated the amount of coal that was remaining on Earth and other things. He didn't at that time talk about the environment, but he was talking about actual, production of energy and raw materials.
That the resources would not be able to keep up with the population.
Yes, he did, and so, but all his predictions proved wrong, of course, and that was a scale issue because he wasn't able to predict that.
We lived in a time, you and I, you're a little older than I am. I'm going to be 60 this year, where they talked about the population bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. So
we lived through the horrible famines in the early '80s. Remember the sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah.
Ravaged by famine.
Yeah. The world. And prior to that, right? Yes, there have been famines, and but if you actually want to see the real difference in humanity and human race over time, just look at the numbers for Africa and Asia, and if you look at you're talking about the growth of middle class, etc. The numbers are astounding. Because while in the United States and in the Western world and in Europe, we have seen our quality of life, we could perhaps argue about that, we've seen our quality of life, but certainly our standard of living improve over recent decades.
Oh, it has.
Yes, it has.
People could argue that.
But they could.
If being in debt.
But if you actually look at what was formerly the third world, if you look at Africa and you look at Asia and you look, we have seen an exponential increase in people's quality of life, standard of living over the last couple of decades.
And what's the results of that?
Well, that's where it gets very interesting, right? Because there are positive
What's the
and negative
environmental
results.
Impact of that?
Well, there are environmental impacts in places, but we're sitting in the country that has had the greatest environmental footprint of all. So what's the people? If we were sitting,
but we're not saying
if we were sitting, if we were sitting in a studio in Cairo or Addis Ababa or in Cape Town, and we'd be saying, the United States.
Why do you pick Cape Town? Because Cape Town is still. Have you been there?
No, it's one of the places I have not been. But I could pick anywhere. I'm just picking 3 random African countries. I thought I'd spread out a little geographically.
South Africa is not typical.
Okay.
Neither would Namibia be.
Right. So
Accra, let's say.
Okay, Accra is fine. So anyway, Marrakesh, wherever you want to pick. If we were having that discussion today, people there would say that that their carbon footprint and their effect on pollution in the world, etc., is minuscule compared to the Western power. So that's I would argue that with them too. But I'm just saying, it's very strange to sort of sit here and say the fact that people are no longer dying by the millions in Africa every day from starvation and disease, or at least not at the extent that they were 20 years ago, and certainly not what they were doing 50 years ago. That somehow we have to question. Oh, but what's the result been on the
What is the result? There's never been 8 billion people before. There's people that are questioning the green revolution.
We're not at 8 billion yet.
We're not.
We're working on it.
That's just a guesstimate.
Well, of course. I mean, nobody has the,
How many people can the world take?
Well, that's an interesting topic, and and luckily, instead of having just people pulling it out of their ears, we have scientists and people looking at this.
And statisticians.
And statisticians too. God help them.
Yes, and you can never manipulate stat.
Of course, I said I
you
was
can
the
never
first
manipulate a sample. You can
I
never
was the
manipulate
first one in this
question.
conversation to say there are statistics, more statistics, and damn lies. So that's why I sometimes go back to the simpler things, and the simpler things are the evidence of our eyes.
Does the average American have a future?
Does the average American have a future? Of course, yes. I presume the average American.
Well, everybody has a future.
Yeah.
I have a future. I'm going to die someday.
That's the one thing we're guaranteed. We will all die one day. So why does the average American? I don't understand.
Because
the
a
question.
society falls apart when the people no longer can plan for a future. In a world of McJobs, as we used to call them a generation ago.
Yeah.
With these kids, what is their future? We're talking about maybe our generation, the baby boom, and you that joined it, that being an American phrase, have an incredible amount of wealth. What about aside from, let's say, the programmers in Silicon Valley and San Francisco?
No. There's a wonderful future in the United States for everybody. There's a future for artists, musicians, writers. Journalism's gone. They don't even teach it in New Hampshire. On the spectrum of writers, journalism is just one piece.
Why is there a future for writers?
Well, you want to hear an answer to this? Because this is something that came as a shock to me. I met a young man 2 years ago who was doing creative writing, was his major in college. And I'm thinking,
there's a real ticket to the middle class, Jim.
That was. Let me tell you that was my reaction. And in my ignorance, I actually shared that with him and said, "You must." I don't know what the words I exactly used, but it was sort of good for you. You must really be dedicated
to
your
went
writing.
To work for,
that's an awful place.
Morgan Stanley.
But no, but he was a young man still in college, about to graduate, and he backed right up on me and went and he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about." And he said, "Do you know that where he was at, right? Creative writing in the gaming industry. The gaming industry is bigger than movies."
He writes the scenarios.
Bigger than books, bigger than magazines, and bigger than newspapers, all rolled together. He said, "I write stories for games, and there's thousands of people like me, and the market is booming."
They take it up from the same 20
plots. The new PlayStation 6 was when you think about the place for artists, graphic artists, technologists, and
everybody,
writers,
you'd encourage your own kids. That's the great.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It's kind of like the old what do they call Pulp Fiction in the old days.
The first thing I would encourage, and I have encoured my kids, and
we're going to have a Dashiell Hammett there.
I tell them to follow their passion. And that's the first thing, right? That if you can manage it, not everybody can, maybe even only that few can, that you can manage to get work in a place where you're passionate. That's like
how many people get that type of job?
Not enough.
How many?
Not enough. But if we
if everybody starts writing.
No,
it's
I'm not
like,
suggesting that.
What was it, around 1990, the spec scripts, If you were going to write a spec script, no matter what the idea was, 5 people already had it. That was a give 'em. Not only in Hollywood, but actually in publishing, too. Any book that had the idea, there's 4 more coming down
today,
the pipe.
if you're a writer, years ago, if you were a writer, you would have had to go down cap in hand to the union leader and hope that the Lobes would give you a job.
But there were more newspapers back then.
Maybe there were 2, maybe there were 3.
But today, you're not talking about real writing. You're talking about like.
Today, the world is your oyster. You've got the blogosphere,
sure it is.
The internet.
Name me one blogger making money, Jim.
I'm sure lots of them are. I just don't know.
Sure, they're just racking up the dough.
Anyway, the bigger issue is you asked about the future of people in America. I am very gung-ho and very positive on the future of America and the future of young people, because first of all, I have great faith in youth and in our young people and in their creativity and in their dynamism.
That's true. Mussolini, Giovinista Fascisti, too. The young fascists. Youth was always the spirit of European fascism. Yates wrote some marching songs from what they call the blue shirts in Ireland.
Yeah, the blue shirt. They were well done, John. You've gotten around. You've got the blue shirts. So no, but so
you're the least gloomy Irishman.
In the end, I'm an optimist.
Which
and my optimism is based on reality, though. My optimism isn't aspirational.
Based on reality.
It's not based.
It's based on a point of view.
It's not based on
it's
some
based on a
woolly
point
dreams.
of view.
I've got empirical evidence and the evidence of my eyes, the evidence of history that shows the march of humanity over millennia and over time has been one of continual improvement, with setbacks, sometimes huge setbacks, sometimes little setbacks. Sometimes setbacks in one geography rather than another. But there's no question at all but that the average human being in 2020 is a lot better off than the average human being was in 1950, 1920, or 1820.
There's a way of looking at things.
What's that?
There's a statistical sample. The average human being. What is the average human being?
Well, if you were to include
I'm going to give a call to as you call it, Moscow.
Moscow. Yeah. So
maybe we can get up to date on the March of Progress in Mother Russia.
I don't know how much time you spent behind the Iron Curtain, but Churchill's Iron Curtain, but
Churchill, that old fashioned.
Well, he's the one who invented the word.
My 17th cousin.
He's the one who invented the word, right?
At the University of Missouri.
Exactly, at the Independence.
I used to know what it was. We've been abandoned by the Russians, Jim.
Right. Well,
maybe she's been attacked by robots.
If you wanted to go on the Russia topic, if you're interested, there's a piece tonight about how.
Is it on television? I don't watch television.
No, it's not. It's a story that's coming out tonight about how Putin is.
Story that was written.
Putin is looking at issuing passports to Ukrainian rebels. And so that will further escalate the difficulties there. But anyway,
he's doing what?
Issuing Russian passports to the Ukrainian,
Eastern
Ukrainians.
Call. Are we getting an incoming call?
Yeah, go ahead, John. It's Victoria.
Do I just have to hit the button?
Yep.
Hello?
Radio now. They're waiting for me.
Yeah, we're here. I'm being clobbered with the most ungloomy Irishman in history. You know, the great Irish-American writer, probably the great playwright, one of the greatest writers of all time, Eugene O'Neill, said, damn the optimists. They're so damn pessimistic.
Well,
I guess that's Irish-American.
Yeah, it is. Well, they're still
Jim believes... This is Jim O'Connell.
Hi, Victoria. How are you?
You've been on before. He is of the belief...
Great. How are you?
Good, thank you.
He's of the belief that mankind, or genkind, or whatever we're going to call it in these genderless years, is on a incredible march forward. And he was defending the Affordable Care Act, too.
No, that was before. He's trying to bring in extraneous matters. The simple contention was only that
it gave you
wasn't that
insurance.
That we were in some kind of glorious present. My only claim is
I think everything's going to hell. A handbasket.
Is that the history of humanity and where we are in the world has been a progression over time. And while we may have moments of less progress or less apparent progress than others, and some setbacks from time to time, but generally speaking, life for the average person today is better than it was 100 years ago, which is better than 120 years ago, which is better than 500 years ago, etc.
Depends on your social class, though.
Well, within that,
if I was a patrician in Greece,
if you're asking, but hang on a minute. What you're saying is that is it true then that every single human being is better off than they were 20 years ago? That's a ridiculous stance, right?
I never said that,
and I didn't say it either.
Let's Victoria, is the average Russian making a march to progress? Jim has a bit of news. Have you heard about it? Tell her the news you just gave us.
Well, I was just saying that tonight it seems that President Putin is looking at issuing passports to the eastern Ukrainians and Ukrainian rebels to further escalate tensions with Ukraine.
But it's not the president, the czar.
The czar? You call him the czar?
Well, he is a czar.
I get, well... Whatever.
He lost the chance to be president a long time ago. Now he's a king.
Yeah.
A czar.
Yeah.
A czar means more than a king.
Well,
he rules by ukase.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, that makes sense to give him Russian passports because Putin is going to fight for Ukraine and Belarus.
Yeah.
So that's his local action kind of thing. You know, he's not going to let Ukraine just go to European Union.
Are they out of Syria now, or are the Russians still in Syria?
But you know what's interesting?
They're
Let
in
me think
Syria
about it. Like, you
and
know, like
Venezuela.
the way Putin is holding on to Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Think about how European Union is holding on to England.
No, it's not.
Why not? I mean, like, England is
not
pretty
going.
much like almost, I don't know, either they stay or they, like, the European Union doesn't want to know them pretty much. That's what it sounds like.
No, what she means is about Northern Ireland and the thing
Well,
that's
Brexit. I think we're talking about Brexit.
But Brexit, the Northern Ireland is a big thorn
just
in
to be
that.
clear- just to
That's
be-
one of the biggest thorns.
Yeah.
Britain never let go of Northern Ireland,
Yes,
did
of
it? Never
course.
let go of
Because
Ulster.
it says that it's part of Britain. That's its claim, of course. But no, the point about Europe at this point is exasperated by the process, have facilitated Britain's vacillation for the last 2.5 years, and the British Parliament itself can't decide on what it wants to do. And Mr. Tusk has been President Tusk of the European Parliament has been at pains to say they just need to make up their minds what they want to do. And by the way, the idea that Europe, of course, did want Britain to remain and did not want Brexit, and if it could wave a magic wand, it would undo Brexit. However, there's a growing attitude in Europe today, in the EU, which says, do we really want a regressive, anti-European Britain remaining as a disruptive force within the EU?
Pelosi, can I just add 5 hours ago? Pelosi warns, Speaker of the House of the United States, there will be no U.S.-UK trade deal if Brexit harms the Irish Peace Accord.
Correct. Yeah, she said that
And
today.
Northern Ireland has been a thorn in the side about the process because of the border.
Yeah.
And Ukraine, and let's face it, how do you say Crimea in Russian? The cream?
Krim.
Yeah, it was given to Ukraine by Khrushchev as part of the political jockeying after the death of Stalin.
Yeah. I got lost now because we were in the EU Brexit. Now we're
Right, she was talking about Ukraine.
Okay.
We're talking
Well,
about
no, what I'm saying is, look how graciously the Soviet Union let everybody let go. Everybody was like free to go. And look at European Union now. It's just a sad story. I mean, they were talking about, not letting British planes flying over Europe. I mean, Soviet Union makes me feel good. Like they just let 15 countries go.
I just think, Victoria, that with all due respect, I just think you're incorrect.
Well, the
in saying that
Europeans
the
were being
Europeans-
bastardly toward them.
No, only if you were British is the only way you'd have that attitude.
Well,
is if
why
you were
wouldn't you?
Brexit-
But
if you
why
were
wouldn't a
Brexiteer.
Brit
If you-
look at it that way?
Because if you think the whole world begins and ends in London, and I quite like London, but if you think the whole world begins and ends in London,
Why wouldn't why wouldn't the government of the UK put the UK foremost?
Of course, they should.
Right.
Yeah. What's the point? I'm not arguing that.
Well, most of my
I'm saying the European Union is not trying to keep there is no evidence that they're trying to keep Britain within the EU. Like there's no action they have taken.
Oh, this is a bore.
That they would kind of that they're coercing them or trying to keep them there.
Hey, what's happening in because she reads Russian. What's happening in Syria now with the Russians?
Oh, who knows?
You used to be up to
Russians are now
date.
in Venezuela. You guys are like behind. Russia's already in Venezuela.
Why, are there military troops there?
They're in Venezuela. Yeah, they landed in Venezuela 3 weeks ago.
How many?
Oh, I don't know. Doesn't matter how
Not
many.
many, but enough.
That's like being a little bit pregnant, right? You're either pregnant or you're not. You either have Russian troops on Venezuelan soil.
It depends. In the
Well, you see,
1980s,
but
that would have been an act of
Russian politics is
war.
always being half pregnant. We're not there. We're there. We're not. That's how we play our politics.
Right, right.
So you can be half pregnant if you're a Russian politician.
I'm very interested in, I'm very interested in the future of Putin, right? So, the last time when he came to the end of his, when he could only run so many times, and then he put Mr. Medvedev
It's
in
not
place.
a democracy.
And I'm just saying, but of course, I'm interested in what do you think happens, when is the next moment of inflection? At what point will he be
I
terminated
think his
again?
ultimate goal is outlive all the European leaders, and with his propaganda tactics, he might kind of destroy the. I wouldn't say it's too big a word to say destroy the democracy, but really corrupt it in Europe. And I think his point is to just outlive all the dictators and all the heads of the European governments to prove the point that their system is failed.
Well, that with all the turmoil like that a democracy has, you once told me on and we were on Matt Connaughton's show that even with just a minimal amount of intervention, he can sow so much discord.
Right.
And you also said the irony is he couldn't affect the Montenegro election.
Right.
They had an impact
That's
on
right.
this one.
But other than being a contrarian and a troublemaker for the sake of being a troublemaker, or creating some noise so that your opposition is less effective or whatever, from a Russian point of view, and which I know is separate from Putin's point of view, but what's in it for him, so to speak? What's the end game? I don't believe, is he some megalomaniac who wants to like reach back to a Soviet era and recapture the satellite countries or something, or is he interested in a powerful Russia?
He's been in power for 20 years. He's completely detached from reality. He lives in a Soviet reality. So he's trying to bring the Soviet Union kind of back,
right?
Like together. So that's where Ukrainian problem and Belarus is coming up soon. So I mean, his idea is like he will prove that whatever Soviet system is viable, and he wants to show Russian people the domination of whatever Russian Soviet. Not propaganda, but what's the word? I forgot.
It's his type of real politics.
State of mind or state of living or lifestyle is better than European. And he also does it to have support of Russians, because it's kind of like the West is the enemy now.
Right.
And so we have to fight against them. And that's an ongoing thing, because he has nothing else to show.
Right. That makes
success,
sense.
Yeah, because what you said about looking at things from Britain's point of view,
we don't have
looking
any
at Moscow's point of
nothing
view.
was done in 20 years. So we are like Venezuela light in a way.
Right.
Light.
So it makes sense from a defensive point of view.
And from he looks at the world from Moscow's point of view.
Also, when you have an economy that's now the same size as Italy's, and you're no longer a world power, then you must have other things to hold in front of your supporters to say, to pretend that, so that they, other shiny objects.
But don't you think when you're in Britain and you watch in the old days, you would watch something. I'm talking about during the Yugoslavian. They would put like the commanding general would be from the United States of France, and the adjutant would be Sir whatever. And in the British press, he was the one leading it.
Right.
All that glory,
It's all subjective.
the glory, and so. Listening to the two of you and your thing about Britain, looking at it from the point of view, he is establishing himself from the Moscow point of view psychologically as a world power. Even if it is just these fiddling little things.
You might see that. But then the other thing,
it covers him up too.
But he's surrounded by a bunch of oligarchs in what has become a kleptocracy. Right?
Oh yeah.
Is that too simple a thought, Victoria?
It is a kleptocracy.
No, it's close.
So then, if he were to suddenly discover statesmanship and magnanimity, and if he wanted to establish himself as a sort of a world, statesman who was going to bring Russia to not modernity, it's modern enough, but bring it to its full place on the world stage. If any of those actions, if he ever decided to switch to that, and any of those actions ever were in conflict with the kleptocrats, to invent a word, isn't he in a pretty dangerous position at that point, since democracy doesn't work?
He would lose power.
He'd lose
Without
his head.
These games, he would no longer have power. Because Victoria once said on one of the shows, his game is to outlive everybody. That's success.
That's a lousy game, right?
Alexander II, wasn't he the one that was blown up in the train?
Right.
And his grandson was executed. God bless you in the control booth.
But,
Thank you.
Yeah.
But,
Putin is young. He's only like 60 years, I think. He can be there another 30 years.
Yeah. Well,
with the robotics.
I think it's Time magazine where they showed Putin like kind of hovering over the world, and he's like the leader of all the outcasts and all the dictators and all the ISIS type of people.
Well,
I mean, that's how he promotes himself right now, really.
The non-aligned people.
He's got competition now because Donald Trump is trying to.
They used to have Nehru.
There's a wonderful piece today, also on the news today, about Poland, right? About this idea of Fort Trump. I don't know if you saw this, but
see, that's so provocative.
So the
to
idea
the Russians.
of opening a major U.S. base in Poland. Now,
with a tank army.
Trump is sort of hoist by his own petard here a little bit, because on the one hand, he wants to have the stance of opposing, U.S. involvement in Europe and in foreign places, etc. At the same time, he wants to support his friend, the very right-wing reactionary government of Poland, and so
and his lobbyists in Washington.
His Polish pals are saying, we want a permanent presence, $2 billion initially.
I wonder what the bribe on that was.
So that's that. So the difficulty for Trump is, does he give the Polish leadership what they want and spend hard-earned U.S. taxpayers' dollars in opening up a major base in Poland?
Well, Jim, now that the Mueller investigation put me in shock and I haven't recovered, he can do just about anything he wants,
I don't believe that.
I mean, taking the bribes.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, because you can't argue on one side
They call it lobbying.
that we need to, that NATO's irrelevant and we need to be pulling out of all these places, and at the same time expand the American military.
Okay, Jim, we'll have Victoria talk a bit.
All right.
It's all yours.
Where to start?
No, I was just going to say, if somebody ever dealt with European bureaucracy, would totally understand Brexit. I mean, there's so many organizations in Europe that just self-sufficient at this point, and the people that get elected there have nothing to do with business, or they're not connected to the land. So I can understand partially why Brexit, why people voted for that, because it's very difficult to promote your national interest in Europe, under European Union bureaucracy. We try to do so many projects. It's almost impossible to describe to Americans what's going on there in terms of, paperwork, laws, regulations from country to country. Very complicated issue. But what I was going to tell also, and we were talking about John about the superstar economy, where the election is happening now, and I kind of support Bernie in that, where we're not talking about how the technological progress actually created this superstar economy, where one player takes all the benefits and take all the money from the market. And it's like companies like Facebook, like Booking.com, which is unbelievable because they make more money than hotel chains. And this is just an organization that connects, people with hotel reservations.
Right.
Uber and Amazon. So it's like the technology does not allow for multiple players on the market. It can be only one.
Well,
one
Amazon.
A little bit better than others.
Amazon wiped out Barnes and Nobles.
Amazon
now it's
wiped out
octopus.
all the online stores.
Right, so we still have,
But we can work for Amazon.
I understand what you're saying, except that, you could say that Coca-Cola and Pepsi eliminated all the soft drink manufacturers around the world, as did, Cadbury Schweppes.
Right, and they did the beer, which became awful.
So, okay, but if you look at, there's a company in Boston, it's called Wayfair, that they sell furniture online. Now, Wayfair has got 3,800 employees in the city of Boston today. Those are 3,800 employees who are earning north of $80,000 a year.
And how many people do they put out in stores that used to be?
I understand. I'm talking about.
And what life did they have? They're not going on to these great jobs in the technology industry.
I'm not saying that there isn't disruption. I'm pointing out
disruption is the big positive
thing. That an insignificant company in the global world like Wayfair has got 3,800 people working in Boston today earning north of $80,000 a year. So there was nobody working at some furniture store in mom and pop store selling
right. So let's wipe out mom and pop, and we take just what she's saying. You take a handful of people and give them all the benefits. You've been to California lately? There isn't a middle class there, Jim. It costs take another $300,000 in income from a family of four. $300,000 to be middle class. Do you know what that puts you in? So what? You know what? I wrote the articles. I used to do this stuff. If I make a $2 billion Superfund site by dropping friggin' radium or whatever, that's $2 billion in economic activity I've made, Jim. Because there was a thing, Tony Blair and the Clintons, but it petered out, called green accounting, where you'd actually, rather than putting that in GDP, you know,
So
it's all good. It's all good. It's all good immiserating people.
The people of California
destroying the middle class.
Much prefer to live in the Californian middle class than they would.
There is no middle class in which you have
Mississippi.
Do you make $300,000 a year?
Not this year.
What's it like to live in California nowadays, Victoria?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So there's like this
There is no middle
I'm not saying
class.
it's good or bad. I'm just saying that it's leading us to have, instead of like 10 millionaires, it's leading us to have 1 billionaire.
We're going back to a medieval rich and
Instead of
serfs.
having multiple wealthy people around, we just have one superstar. And so what I'm saying is, nobody's really addressing that, because it's changing the market. And like, even if you look at Amazon, where they pack the stuff at their places, mostly it's robots, and the only humans that working there, they have to work like robots pretty much.
Well, we have our robot maker here,
unemployment in the United States is 3.7%.
and I'm Jim. I would like to have a job, but I can't get it.
But the
Once
point
you
is-
fall,
the point is it's
no,
not
there isn't a
37%.
point. That's hedonics. That was the change from GNP to GDP. You're going to deny that people? Yeah, it's a whole joke to you,
It's
right?
not a joke. It's not a joke.
That the
Okay,
people that
we
are
have
unemployed or
we have a lot
underemployed
of openings
that don't have
everywhere. You
jobs.
can say apply.
My
The problem is with those openings, the hourly pay is only like $15, maybe.
$15.
That's
Yeah,
the
because
problem.
but if you were in New Hampshire, they would be on $7.
But it's not in
75.
50, yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you
The
live
point-
on
the
that?
point is-
I was in the Market Basket, which Ted Gatz has brought here and knocked out the unionized workforces, the chains that were here in Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
And the person I was with, she was so fed up with the job. She was,
Yeah, so look, the point is that
well, no, the
it's
point
not
is,
true.
Jim, there's the unemployment rate isn't 4%.
Okay, well,
it's
pick any
understated.
number, pick any number you want, double it, make it 8%. If you want to double
But
it,
it's
let's
understated.
say it's understated by
Understated.
100%. Understated by 100%. You're at 8% still. So if you go down to if you go to San Francisco next week and you go down Market Street or you go over to Marin
yet what-
County and you walk into any restaurant anywhere and there are people, all the tables are full. There are people out on the streets.
There's
walking out.
there's 45 million people in California. There's a huge underclass. The whole place nearly fell apart economically. What do you
When?
think people could, when?
And one more
God
point.
damn it, what do
because
you
of that.
think?
So
How many
instead of
taxes do you think
we
the
have-
people can pay?
Sorry, I missed that.
John, if we have no unemployment, then why we have such a high food stamp program? And
Right,
it doesn't go
right.
down. So if we have
Unprecedented.
no unemployment, we shouldn't need food
Yeah.
stamps.
Victoria, let me be very plain here.
Oh, but
We-
it's all good to you, right?
no.
That you have this huge underclass and the middle class that's
We have
being
had-
expunged.
We just.
Do you have any
in the
idea
United
what the
States-
state taxes are in
In the
California?
United States, we almost voted for a president.
Why
who ended up-
households need $300,000 to be middle class?
Right.
Do you make $300,000?
No.
Does that put you in the
No,
top
that's not the
1%?
point.
It does.
That's not the point.
It is the point, Jim.
No.
You need an income that very few people have.
So
The middle class is being extinguished.
I agree with.
I look at the streets here. It's full of people with no futures. There
Where?
are kids
Where?
out here. Manchester.
Where are the
Oh,
kids
there's
with no
no homeless
futures?
situation,
There
right?
is.
Oh, and it's all under such lovely control.
No, I'm not saying that.
Blue
I'm
skies.
saying, listen, we've had 40 years in the United States of progressively taxing, allowing the wealthiest 1% to extract most.
But
of the wealth.
$300,000 is the
Most of the wealth,
1%.
most of the
Is
wealth
the 1%.
Is being allowed to accrue
Is
at
the
the top. So
1%.
we're agreed on that, I think.
And you're all, there's going to be a handful of people making $80,000, and the people that had jobs that allowed them to be into the middle class. You can roll your eyes and
I don't
pull,
admit that.
like the Christian brothers did when you were being a naughty boy back in Ireland. But it
Yeah.
doesn't. There is. What do you think is the reaction that's fueling this? I was going to use a bad word for him. That not down in, I use a less one. Down in Washington, the economic
You're talking about President
insecurity of people.
Yes, I understand that. The idea that the elite, again, the anti-elites, etc. I understand that.
It's
I can
not
see
just
that.
anti-elites. We've always had, the United States has always been a place of anti-intellectualism. And the way our democracy is structured, it's not parliamentary. We don't have the apparatchik class of a France. But, so, the boobs actually get out there and vote and can affect things.
I spent some time talking
the
tonight about the
federalism.
budget in the state of New Hampshire and how that people have an open choice as to what they want to vote
Well, they
for.
really
They can
think
vote for
that.
whatever. No, they
Yeah.
can vote for. They have a clear choice in the next
As a
election.
federal system. They don't have much of a choice because you got two shitty parties. Excuse me, you got to bleep that one out.
So anyway, so where does that leave us? I stand by my contention that
There's
humanity
turmoil.
writ large and the United States in particular are on a march of improvement over time, and with our setbacks from time to time, we still are
California.
on a march to improvement, and that includes California.
So-
Might even be led by California.
Sure, it's a medieval world with a tiny elite. No,
Feudalism?
because that's not happening.
No. Well,
That's not
It is
happening.
happening.
It is happening, Jim.
No.
Why don't you go live there then?
no. I did live there.
And I lived
It
there,
started
and
to
I
look
couldn't go
more like
back.
Brazil, that's the problem.
It's-
we have nice houses,
it's
but then
Brazil.
we have tents next to it.
And
Right.
where was the Reaganomics? That's the bedrock of the Democratic Party now in the post-Reagan
Well, you
era.
spent-
Where was the Reaganomics, which was Milton Friedman, Chicago School Economics? Where was it first used? Where was it, the pilot program? In the Brazil after the junta in '64.
California began its experiment 30 years ago in charter schools. Today it has 1,300 charter schools.
This isn't education matters. This is about how
And
being
so-
middle class
and so what-
in
what-
California
what has-
requires an income that 99, people don't have, most people don't have.
What would you like to happen? You want everybody to only earn 20,000 a year, and we'd all be happy in misery? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you want? What are you actually
Oh,
saying?
geez. He's anti-socialist, right?
No. I'm fine with socialism. I think it's wonderful.
I'm just saying, let's look at the reality. I don't have any solutions.
If you want
I'm
to,
not
if
a
you want to argue
politician.
about trickle
I'm
down,
not going to pretend.
If you want to argue
I'm
about,
not going to pretend
if-
that everything's like coming up roses.
If-
Look what we had, the election of 2016.
Yes,
That,
embarrassing.
we can all say, it was the
Embarrassing,
Russians, which it
embarrassing.
really wasn't.
Right. So yes, we could.
Comey
Listen,
did
if
in,
you want to agree on, so we can agree that trickle down economics is a disaster,
disaster.
and we can agree on that. I think that's clearly that the United States is now less of a meritocracy than it ever has
Well, it's
been.
been for a long time.
For many years. at
England,
least.
20 years ago, according to The Economist, had more
So we could agree on all
social
those. We could
mobility.
agree on those. We could agree that our political and economic policies and our domestic economic policies over the last 40 years have been such that
We
they
have
damaged
we
the
have
middle
gone
class.
back, and
We
it's
could
just
agree with
not
all
the
of that. I
it's
agree with
just
all of
not the
that.
last few years. It started in the W time, where we're going back to the time of the robber barons, the inequities,
I think we have. Well, I
and the middle class people can live, are being allowed. The middle class that's still allowed, are living on debt, the likes of which was never seen, and in the classical economics, we both were brought up in with no savings.
The country's living on debt like we've never seen.
But the
Like, I
consumer
can't-
debt is $16 trillion.
Let me start one thing at a piece at a time.
It's crazy.
Let's talk about one thing at a time. I am
We
puzzled
only got a couple minutes, Jeff.
that my friends who describe themselves as fiscal conservatives in the Republican Party, who will defend borrowing a couple of $1 trillion from the Chinese
It's all
to
gone
give tax breaks,
$4 trillion.
to give tax breaks to a bunch of millionaires. I don't understand, and no problem with borrowing their grandchildren's money. I don't understand that at all.
So now
I agree about
we've
that.
got the common ground. But now it's like, what do you do about it? We have an election coming up.
Yeah, people should study these things, look at them, and they should vote in their own interest.
I don't know if that can happen or will happen.
Well, we voted. We had a change of parties in Concord last year, and as a result of it, we have a proposal on the table today that has passed both houses that will bring $16 million extra into Manchester for Manchester schools.
Now that's very
if,
good.
If Sununu doesn't veto it, but he might. So if Sununu hadn't been elected, then that would
bet he
likely
won't.
pass. And
He's running for Senate, needs Manchester.
The property taxpayers of Manchester would have $16 million less per year to have to fund the schools in, or if part of it was schools and part of it for tax relief. But that's the choice, and people can make that choice. We can make the choice here with regard to the mayor's race in Manchester. It looks like it's falling out across those lines, and we can make the choice with regard to the governor's race and the House race. It's pretty simple stuff. We get what we deserve.
Well, we unfortunately, I believe what George Carlin says, that we get the politicians we deserve. But we, as a, you know, we're looking at the. But I don't deserve them. You probably don't either.
No, well, you know, the people have spoken, and albeit that there was 3 million less than a majority, they spoke, and under our legitimate system, you know.
I'm going to tell you, Victoria, we were talking about gene expression in people that suffer from depression. I think we ought to adopt the rose-colored glasses of Jim, because it does keep you in the pink of health.
Yes,
because if you really are, the world is a slaughterhouse, and if you look at it that way,
we're a long way from
if you look at it that way,
we're a long way from Upton Sinclair in the jungle and
an abattoir. It's an abattoir. You've
seen
seen the sausage made up.
We're a long way from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and you know the world has.
Are we?
We are. We are.
You don't think? I remember. I lived in New York in the '80s. It's just a stone throw away, Jim, to come back.
And it's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful
in the
place.
1980s.
What, New York? No, I'm talking about today. You could argue New York is a much nicer place today than it was in the 1980s.
Jesus, that's without saying. You have any last words, Victoria, from Moscow?
Stay strong there. Winter is coming.
There you go. Winter for you, is it?
And we'll have to talk about the robots on another show. I think Jim is on their side.
On the robot side?
And when are we going to talk about Game of Thrones and all that political discussion?
The only thing about the Game of Thrones is about the mother of dragons.
The problem with dragons in Game of Thrones, they're not dragons, they're griffins, right? A dragon's got 4 legs and separated wings. What's actually in the Game of Thrones are griffins. So if you want to be precise, what they're calling dragons are not dragons at all. Go look it up.
Well, you'll have to. You want to come on the show and debate Jim on?
I've never seen the show. I don't know. I've never seen an episode.
I've only seen a couple of episodes.
I do know that what's depicted in those trailers are griffins. There are no dragons. I've seen no dragon in Game of Thrones. Look it up.
What do you think of that, Victoria? You've been bamboozled.
I'm fine with griffins. I mean, mother of griffins. Well, it's even better.
Well, they're griffins.
You better watch out, yeah. Where are you going now, Jim?
I'm going home to my beautiful wife and children, and
to a rosy future, blue skies.
I trust in fate. I trust in God. I trust in the future. I trust in humanity. I'm an optimist.
I'm a pessimist.
Well, there you go. See, if we meet in the middle, we'll have neutrality, equilibrium.
Yes.
If you're equally amount pessimistic as I am optimistic, we'll reach equilibrium, and this will be like a center of...
Actually, we agree on like 99.944 and stuff. But it just isn't fun to be in agreement.
It's fun around the edges. Anyway, it was a pleasure, Victoria. Nice chatting to you.
It's hardly the edges.
Nice chatting to you.
Perhaps we'll meet in Moscow one day.
Or in Pebble Beach.
Or Pebble Beach.
Pebble Beach, yeah.
It's nicer. I'll talk to you later, Victoria. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Victoria.
All great art comes from people on the edge. So maybe when you meet your artists, you'll tell them that.
I think so. Are we
Not
good?
quite yet.
Oh, all right. So you're
Have you ever seen Long Day's Journey into Night?
Long Day's Journey into Night. No, I have not. But we've talked about it before.
And have you ever seen The Iceman Cometh?
The Iceman Cometh. I've seen The Iceman Cometh.
The play?
But Long Day's Journey into Night. Yes. So I
all 4 hours. We got 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do the plays someday, and at home I have a whole I have a whole play like a
We're running out of time.
So we
Adios. Thanks, Jim.
Thank
for
you,
the
John.
blue skies.
Thank you, John.
You're helping my gene expression.
It's a wonderful life.
I hope so.
Good night, folks.
That's another movie.
Well, that's why he chose it. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, John.
Are we gone yet?
Thank you, John. I think so.
Say bye, John.
Adios. Do svidaniya. Well, thank you. He said